Hello, hello. It's Tuesday. Oh my goodness. Daylight savings time has me so confused. But here we are. It's Tuesday and it's time for Heart and Mind. And I'm Dr. Dina McMillan. This is the show that everyone needs to watch. Do you consider yourself someone who is trusting, compassionate, empathetic, forgiving? Oh, goodness, those are wonderful traits, aren't they? We're going to talk today about having these traits can make you more appealing to toxic partners. And we're going to talk about what you can do about it. Yes, I know everything is all right. Please know I'm here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, whether or not we're in daylight savings. So, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're not going to be boring. We're going to talk about things from an angle that other people don't cover. But the fact that others don't cover it doesn't mean it's not important. I want to get deep into your life and into your mind and into your heart, show you what's really going on, and help you so that you don't get taken advantage of. So 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. on the Pacific Coast. I also have people, if you've watched the show before, my friend Melinda often joins me from Australia, where it is Wednesday morning during the workday, and she still carves some time out to be on the show. Now, she's not going to be able to join us today, but I have people who watch the show from Australia, where if you know me at all, you know I lived there for a long time. I also have lived in the UK, so I have some friends who are joining me from Oxfordshire, from the Lake District, from London, where it's 1 o'clock in the morning, so they have insomnia, and I admit that. Why is this show so different? Because I'm a social psychologist. It's that simple. In social psychology, we study how the brain works. We study power dynamics. We look at how we learn, how we're influenced and persuaded, how we're manipulated and coerced, how we are indoctrinated and brainwashed. And I don't just show you how it's done. I show you how it's done within our lives, within our society, and I show you how to cut those strings so you're not influenced against your will. That's the important part. Now, talk about influence. All of us had our lives taken over by the COVID response. And afterwards, Pfizer, one of the main developers of the COVID vaccine, went to court to keep the studies on the impact of those vaccines hidden for 75 years. But the court said no. But who's going to go through all that paperwork to figure out what's going on? Well, we had someone who did it. Dr. Naomi Wolf, Amy Kelly, and a whole crew of very highly qualified people went through these studies to be able to figure out what these vaccines did to us, are doing to us, what will happen if we take them again. And they wrote it up in a book that's easily accessible. It's designed to be accessible by people without medical degrees. It also, buying your copy, also supports the work of this network, Daily Clout. So please go to Amazon and get your own copy of the Pfizer papers. It's that simple. Now, today's topic is a really interesting one. We're going to talk about why trusting people, why people who are forgiving and kind and altruistic, they keep attracting really terrible partners, and they tend to stay in those relationships. I want to break that cycle. And we have the Beauty and the Beast here, Imagine, if you would, if the beast never transformed and Belle had to live her whole life with someone who, whenever he didn't get his way, he would bare his teeth and his talons and he would attack. What quality of life would she have had? A lot of people are going through that, and it's one of my areas of specialty. So I hope you will stay with us as we talk about this, because it's crucially important. Right now, we're watching two global flashpoints unfold at the same time. The takedown of El Mencho has thrown Mexico into chaos, and U.S.-Iran military tensions are escalating faster than anything we've seen in years. Here's what most people don't realize. Every time global instability spikes like this, one asset surges: gold. It happened after 9/11. It happened during the 2008 financial crisis. It happened when Russia invaded Ukraine, and it's happening again right now. There's a new free report called The Global Crisis Playbook that lays out exactly what's going on and what it means for your retirement. It includes a step-by-step guide to moving your retirement into physical gold, tax-free and penalty-free, plus a 7-point checklist experts say every retiree should complete before the next crisis hits. You're not going to hear this on the evening news, but if you have a 401k, IRA, or any retirement savings, this is worth reading. Download it free at cloutgold.com or call 855-803-GOLD to get your copy mailed to you. That's cloutgold.com or call 855-803-GOLD. Well, this topic of people who are taken advantage of for their empathetic nature, for their forgiving nature, for their welcoming nature, for their altruism, that has been a hot topic this week because of Sundays on the 7th of March, the terrorist attack in New York. Now, let's just show a really quick video to remind you of what occurred.
We were born and raised in New York, and we want everyone here to stay in New York. You don't get to come from outside and then tell everyone else.
Did you see that? That man, his name is Walter Masterson. He's talking about how everyone is welcome in New York, and he has a Muslim jihadist actually use him as leverage, as a point of entry, and to step up and throw a bomb into the crowd protesting against open immigration and immigration of certain groups who seem to hate America. And that's not unusual. The risk associated with being too trusting, too willing to believe people are well-meaning. We see it. We're going to talk about romance here, but we see it extends well beyond a romantic relationship. And we're going to talk about this guy as well. Because if you'll notice, I know you'll probably have to screenshot it and enlarge it to see what he says. After this happened, after this young man used him to launch a bomb to attempt to kill people who disagreed with his point of view, this guy said, and I still stand by it, he's born and raised in New York. Everyone is welcome except the main guy who was protesting against immigration from hostile groups. So he says something really rude that I actually blocked out. He called him a goat fornicator because he was protesting against people like this young man coming into our country and making it unsafe. And we're going to not only talk about people who are genuinely forgiving and open, We're also going to show you the difference between someone who is really kind and forgiving and is taken advantage of because of that, and someone who just self-identifies as being a kind and open and loving person, but they're really a hateful bully who is only kind to their own group and whatever people their group has given the tick of approval. Anyone else is bullied to an extent that is unforgivable. Let's talk about that, because this is really important. One of the things I can tell you that doing studies on speed dating, new studies have shown that people with high empathy, people who are really kind, who try to understand someone else's point of view, who try not to be judgmental, that sounds good, right? Except they're less likely to reject manipulative or cruel partners early. Now, for me, this is heart-wrenching information. Why is that? Because I have developed the world's first and most effective domestic violence prevention program that shows you the exact tactics used by abusers of every race, creed, and color, both sexes, every gender identity, every sexual orientation, the same small group of tactics all of them use to lure in a partner and trap them in that relationship. And we have found more than 82% of people who've taken my education training seminars have found that they were able to use that information to protect themselves in real life because of the way it was taught. It's not just the information being given, it's also because of my knowledge of the brain. We use interactive exercises. I use tools to make the information embed more deeply so that it's available to be used in heightened circumstances, whether you're scared, angry, strongly attracted to someone, whether you like them or not. At those points in time, your logical, rational brain tends to quiet itself and other parts of the mind come to the fore. Well, I put the information in those other parts of the mind, so you still have them available. So more than 82% of people were able to use the information within 6 months from taking my training to keep themselves safe. However, I'm looking at that and thinking to myself, how can I make it 95%? How can I make it 99%? Part of my problem is probably that a good portion of these people were so kind, were so forgiving, were so accepting, that even when the warning signs showed up and they'd been told how important they are, they chose not to act to protect themselves. I want domestic abuse and violence against anyone to be so rare, it's something you have to look it up to be able to find it, because you don't know anyone in your personal life that's gone through it. That's my goal. So we have to get rid of all the other causes, but we also have to target this. We have to target being someone who's so trusting and forgiving that you keep walking into danger and you will not protect yourself. Because remember something, like that guy, like Walter, he's standing there saying, oh, you guys are bad people for not wanting bombers to immigrate into your neighborhood, for not wanting rapists to come into your cities. People like that can put us in danger, even if they're not. He's not really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about empathetic. He's following a social trend to make himself popular. That's different. I'm talking about real empathy, where you're just still, well, maybe they mean it this time, and oh, they had a bad day. No, those people put the rest of us at danger. So if you are like that, I want you to keep your kindness. I want you to keep your forgiveness and your lack of being super harsh and judgmental. That is not my goal, to turn you into one of those people. But I do want you to protect yourself and anyone you're responsible for. That includes your kids, your family, your community. This is what we're aiming for today. Let me ask you something. When a big IPO hits the market and jumps 30% in one day, who really made the money? Because after 45 years in the markets, here's the truth. By the time the opening bell rings, Wall Street insiders have already positioned. Venture funds, institutional capital, the well-connected crowd. They buy in years before the headlines, while companies are still private. Then IPO day becomes a media spectacle. Hype, momentum, fear of missing out. But that's not early. That's after early investors have already seen the biggest gains. For decades, access to pre-IPO growth was limited to insiders. That's beginning to change. Today, there are regulated ways for everyday investors to gain exposure before the bell, before the frenzy. If you'd like to learn how it works, go to preIPObackdoor.com. That's preIPObackdoor.com. Because when the crowd shows up, the real fortunes may already be gone. Sorry about that. Trying to get this platform to synchronize sound is sometimes a little challenging. You notice the first ad was okay. The beginning of that ad was okay. And then it started to get really strange. I do apologize, but you were able to get the information. Please contact them. It's invaluable information if you do any investing at all. Now, I'm sure you probably haven't heard this, but the tendency to think the best of people, while it can be really reassuring when you're dealing with someone and they're kind to you and they think the best of you, it's also, without the second part we're going to talk about today, it's a high-risk mindset. And it's actually been identified. They call it the light triad. So let's look at what a light triad is. Light triad is exactly the opposite of a dark triad, which is Machiavellianism, a long word that means hyper-manipulativeness. Even that's long, okay? So the tendency to manipulate people all the time, that's Machiavellianism. Malignant narcissism. So it's not just having all the issues with narcissism. With malignant narcissism, there is a degree of vindictiveness that makes them quite dangerous. Psychopathy. And also something that often accompanies this psychopathy, which is sadism. That's considered the dark triad. This is the opposite. The light triad includes three characteristics as well. The first is faith in humanity, a general belief that people are fundamentally good, with good intentions, and worthy of trust. Now, again, I am not going to try to dissuade you from thinking that way. What we're going to talk about is part two, how you have to put some protective factors in there. So when you're dealing with genuinely good people, when you're dealing with people who are just doing it tough, you're able to reach out heart and mind and help them, but not the people who are using your beneficent behaviors, your a desire to be helpful, your altruism. They're not going to use it against you. Because remember, there are a lot of people that are not looking for kindness and forgiveness and someone to help them across. They are looking for control and they are looking for endless resources. And you have to protect yourself from those individuals. The light triad. Number two, it also includes humanism. Valuing the inherent dignity, worth, and uniqueness of every individual. So this is the kind of person who, even if they have strong beliefs that we are supposed to live a particular way, they are still civil and kind to people who live differently, who come from different backgrounds, who have different options and alternatives, who make different choices because they believe everyone deserves to be treated with a basic level of civility, regardless of their background, regardless of their social status. And the third, of the light triad is Kantianism, and it's from Immanuel Kant's idea that of treating people as an end in themselves, prioritizing honesty and authenticity in your interactions. So being genuine with people and not looking at people, oh, I want them, I'm going to be nice to them so they will do this, or I'm going to be nice to them so they will give me that. Just treating people decently as you go through your life, because everyone has a struggle that you don't know about and may not understand. The positives of being a very empathetic person, something that psychologists tend to call empathic, but it's basically the same thing as being empathetic, although it has a deeper meaning with psychology. It really means making a genuine effort to understand someone else's perspective on a deep level, which is something a good psychologist is able to do. Now, people who have that mindset, people who are part of the light triad, have higher life satisfaction. They have greater empathy for others. They're more compassionate. They're more open. And they are altruistic and forgiving. And they tend to be less self-centered. So being around, for all of the issues that we're going to discuss, the vulnerabilities of people in the light triad, they are a joy usually to be around because they bring the light in with them, which is lovely. But they need, again, to be careful, because often if a person who thinks like this gets in trouble and you know that you're not quite like this, they're going to rely on you to rescue them when things hit the fan. The risk. Here's the risk of being a light triad person, of thinking humanity is good. You know, I've met countless women talking about how to stay safe from abuse, and they pride themselves on things like saying, I trust someone until they prove to me that they're not trustworthy. I tell them the smart thing to do is do the opposite. Be considerate, be nice, be civil, but don't give your trust until you know someone is trustworthy. Because once you give your trust to someone, you become vulnerable to them. And if they are not a good person, the damage they do can be serious. Reduce selectivity by these people, by this really empathetic, I want to be kind, I'm nice to everyone sort of people. They allow the red flags to just go by. And I thought I'd be a little funny and use something from Wreck-It Ralph, where he says to Satan, thanks, Satan. And Satan says, it's a teen, actually. Okay. Now, again, can I just make a little comment about this? This is part of an effort I've been seeing over the last 15, 20 years to make evil seem like it's not evil, it's just misunderstood. And while I used these graphics, giving full credit to, the Wreck-It Ralph people and Disney, it's not harmless. It really isn't harmless. So you have a situation where if the devil does something for Ralph, how likely is he going to listen when the devil comes along and says, remember when I did that favor for you? This is what I need you to do for me. Light triad people are more likely to believe excuses, buy sob stories, and accept poorly framed self-definitions. When somebody tells you, I'm a good person, we don't really mean you any harm as a group. Oh, okay, they said that, so let's trust them. That's what light triad people do. And while on one hand, I'm grateful for their goodness, on the other hand, they make the rest of us have to clean up after their messes, okay? Because they put the rest of us at risk as well, but they're also at risk. If you are a really good person, please don't get angry with me talking about this. If you see yourself as kind, trusting, forgiving, altruistic, generous, God bless you. I just want you to also be careful, because if you get hurt by somebody who takes advantage, it will not just impact you, it will probably impact all the people around you. And you need to keep that in mind. Since the 1960s, our culture has promoted this light triad thinking and perceptions and behaviors and ignored the inherent risk. If you looked, we used to have a high trust society. We don't anymore. Why? Because people who are encouraged to be light triad are continuing to allow high risk people, allow criminal behavior, allow people who hate us to infiltrate our communities and get away with it. Look how often people who commit horrible crimes are not even sent to prison. And it's not just that the prison, the punishment could be a lesson to that person and anybody else who wants to do that. By having them free in the community, they immediately go back and hurt someone else. So what we've been encouraged, probably since the 1960s, is we've been encouraged to welcome the Trojan horse. The Trojan horse filled with our enemies. We've been encouraged to let that infiltrate into our communities, into our country, into our neighborhoods, into our families. Now, it's important to note, again, I mentioned it at the top, but I always get new people right around now. I mentioned it at the top. A lot of people who define themselves, I recently met a woman here who defines herself as just kind and caring and inclusive. You know, she uses all those terms, but spending time with her, she is absolutely angry and bullying to anyone who might vote differently, who might think differently, who has different values. That is not like triad. That is not what I'm talking about today. That is virtue signaling. That is being indoctrinated. We're going to talk about this more, but I mean, if you are the type of person who wishes harm on anyone who doesn't share your exact beliefs, you are not an empathetic person. What you are doing is posturing for the public. You are telling yourself, I'm a great person, and not holding yourself accountable. We've seen so much hatred. Melinda always teases me about using this picture of the first guy because it is a real photo. It's not AI. This guy is vandalizing a Tesla truck because once Elon Musk came out in support of Donald Trump, a lot of left progressive people felt it was okay to try to destroy any Teslas that they saw, even though those had been purchased by other people, usually fellow Democrats. But they felt it was okay to just destroy them, to put swastikas on them, to call for his death. Look how many death threats and attempts on his life that Donald Trump has had. If you're the kind of person who celebrated 6 months ago today, somebody assassinated Charlie Kirk. If you were the one of the people who was happy he was murdered in front of his family, you are not the good person you think you are. You are not empathetic. And you notice that Walter guy that I talked about at the beginning took the time to make a really cruel comment about the person who was protesting open immigration for Muslims. Even after a Muslim used him as leverage to throw a bomb at other people, so he can't say, I don't believe it really happened. He saw it happen. He was used for it. He still took the time to make a really cruel comment about the January 6th protester who is opposing some of the immigration policies that we currently have. Are you really a kind, loving, tolerant person? If you only forgive people who want to hurt you, that doesn't make you a good person. You are not like triad in that case. Here, listen to this one, pay attention, listen up. An empathetic person does not only try to understand, trust, and forgive those within their own group or the group that's been identified as sacrosanct, as the mascots of your group. No. If you are really an empathetic person, even somebody that has opposing views, you're going to try to understand how they feel. You're not going to keep making sniping comments and rude comments. As I said, dealing with this woman this weekend, it was really interesting because I told you one of my closest friends has political views exactly opposite to mine. But we both really care about the community. We really care about helping people. We don't want people to be in unhealthy relationships. We put all our effort into trying to fix it. And she would never think of acting like that, constantly making sniping and rude comments, and nor do I. That's not good. That's rude. It's bullying. It's cruel. So if you are somebody who does that, stop it. Like if you're somebody that makes fun of people who are left wing when you are in the majority, that's not okay. You can disagree with them. But if you want to see yourself as a good person, stick to your principles, but don't be a bully. I don't care what your political beliefs. Empathy. Now let's talk about what is empathy. When I'm talking about this, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, and the ability to consider events from another person's perspective. This can be invaluable. And here's a little aside. As you know, I'm fairly conservative and fairly traditional. I say fairly because in some areas, probably not so much. One of the things I've noticed over the years is the average man that I deal with finds it impossible to actually have empathy for how women feel in different situations. And there's a really quick cure if you have sons. Now, I'm not talking about making them weak and feminine. That is not what I'm saying. But if you give them at least some books where the protagonist of the book is a girl, it will allow them to have a level of understanding of their mother and their sisters that they may not have otherwise. Some men find it just appalling that you would even ask to understand. And do you know who Jackson Katz is? He wrote a marvelous book called The Macho Paradox. And in his training, he talked about going to a co-ed class and asking them, all right, for all the guys here, what did you do today before you came to this session to keep yourself from being sexually assaulted? Usually the guys laugh and say, I didn't go to jail. Okay. Then he asks the women, I dressed a certain way. I had pepper spray in my purse. I parked my car a certain place. And they just start listing all of the things that we women have to do to try to stay safe. And the guys are looking and thinking, we don't think about that. This is what I mean about positive empathy, to actually say, okay, what do you have to consider in your life? Now, I'm going to look at a couple of the comments here. Frank Brescia says something, since I just joined in, unless someone said it earlier, like Dalton and Patrick Swayze said in the movie Roadhouse, be nice until it's time not to be nice. Expect the unexpected. Roscoe, hi, sweetie. He said, sorry, I'm late, I'll rewind. And Frank admits, I'm not kind and loving. It's less than 2 months, and I have Zarin Mamdani fatigue already here in New York City. He's sorry, Frank, that's fine. You see an active threat and you're calling it. You're not willing to overlook it and say, well, everything happens for the reason and everything will be fine. No, that she'll be all right, mate mindset is a basic cultural norm in Australia, and that's why they're being taken over by the Indians and the Chinese. And when we get back to empathy, please understand, again, I am telling you, empathy, but you can use empathy even if you are not like triad, even if you know well. And after working for so long with abusers, I was shocked and appalled by what these guys told me. We had confidential interviews. So we're talking right now, it's probably close to 900 that I've spoken with in confidential interviews where they knew unless they threatened to kill themselves or their partner, I had to take what they told me to my grave. I can never reveal it. So they were extremely open. The mask came off. They were very open. And I was shocked and appalled. Now, I couldn't show it on my face, because I've been trained not to. But I was shocked and appalled. You have got to realize not everyone is a good person. But sweet, empathetic people do make life easier sometimes. However, when you are somebody who goes too far, you're constantly having to be protected by others, and that's not fair. But empathy isn't a flaw, it's a valuable human trait. Empathy allows us to understand others on a deep level. It helps us build relationships. If you know what someone else is going through, it helps you to build a relationship with them. It helps us collaborate more effectively because when somebody says something, well, I have to take this into consideration, you don't immediately eliminate it. Because one of the hardest things to deal with is to have a team or a group project where people say to themselves, if it's not relevant to me, if it hasn't happened to me, then it's nobody else should care about it either. I constantly deal with this when I'm working with abuse, where people say, when I talk about the risk factors, and you'll have somebody in the group, well, that's never happened to me. And they'll say it like, because it hasn't happened to me, it necessarily couldn't have happened to anybody else. That is complete opposite of empathy. That's a level of narcissism, and it's not helpful. Having empathy and understanding what someone else is experiencing, we all rely on that. There'd be no positive social changes without empathy. They tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. They look for the good. They want to help the wounded and the vulnerable. They tend to feel responsible for others' emotions. And in fact, they tend to catch others' emotions. You've heard of social contagion. There's emotional contagion as well. And they believe problems can be solved through communication. If you've ever heard, how many of you have heard of restorative justice programs? Where people think that if they get criminals together with their victims and they talk it out and the person, nods and listens, that there's some healing that can begin. Because 9 times out of 10, that person's not sorry. 9 times out of 10, they do it again. 9 times out of 10, they're doing it because they'll get a lighter sentence for participating. The person thinks they're healed, but what they've done is underestimate the threat, and that's not helpful. Frank said, once something happens to you, you realize how evil people can be unless you're in a leftist cult. Well, they realize it too. In fact, what they do is they have a blind spot, rose-colored glasses of the harm in their own group or the people that they promote. And they take all that harm and they foist it on the group that they see as the opposition. So they will exaggerate the harm of even asking a question. Silence is violence, they'll say. While they have people that are brutalizing and stealing and hurting people, rape, murder. They don't see that. But you disagreed with this person publicly, so you need to have your life ruined. Roscoe said he scowled when I said restorative justice. Yeah, it's not that I don't think theoretically it's a good idea if humans weren't humans, but understanding humanity, as I've been trained to do, it's not helpful. As I said, it makes the person who was victimized feel like the person was genuinely sorry and there's some healing going on. But 9 times out of 10, that person is just using the process to lighten their sentence. If they get out early, they'll hurt somebody else. And the person who's been victimized will make themselves vulnerable again. And that's also bad. Now, empathetic people, those lovely traits of feeling forgiveness and trust, and holding hands and singing kumbaya, it makes you people predictable to manipulators, predators, users, sadists, psychopaths. They view these traits as an opportunity to use, control, and harm. Now, toxic personalities conduct a character assessment early in the acquaintance With my Unmasking the Abuser program, this is something that I talk about. And I'm noticing there's a little bit of a lag. Let me change the format to see if it'll work quicker. It doesn't really change it because I want you to be able to see me as I'm talking to you. Sorry about the lag. We've been having some technical difficulties with our network here. Unmasking the Abuser is a program that actually describes explicitly and using role play and lots of fun, but it describes what manipulative, toxic manipulators do in order to entice people to have relationships with them, whether it's romantic, friendship, work relationships, social movements, and to keep that person from recognizing the danger they're in. So it allows that person, the toxic manipulator, to be trusted when they're not trustworthy. It allows them to gain control very quickly. It allows them to encourage an emotional bond that is one-sided. So they look at people and they say, is this person generous? Are they forgiving? Will they forgive easily? Will they tolerate bad behavior? And if I give them excuse, they forgive me. If the answer is yes, if you're this type of person, if you see yourself as being generous, you forgive easily, you tolerate bad behavior, if the person has a reason, you're going to become a target. And it could be just your kids. Little kids can tell if they have a parent that will not hold them accountable, that they can get away with things. And what is really interesting about my Unmasking the Abuser program and what I teach is that most people that I've met, in fact, I've never met anybody that recognized this. I'm a social psychologist, so I knew, but they don't realize that the tactics that are really powerful and important show up within the first 30 days of getting to know a toxic manipulator. And again, I'm not going to just say it's romance. So I'm not saying a romantic partner. I'm talking about in your workplace, friendship. Usually within the first 30 days, they start building that foundation that gives them control, that causes you to make decisions that are going to be really hard to reverse. So the manipulation, exploitation, most people only recognize it after months or years have passed, but it started at the beginning. And when I pointed out to people, when I pointed out to victim survivors, I haven't met one yet where these indicators weren't there, but nobody told them how dangerous it was. In the early days, toxic manipulators craft a powerful emotional atmosphere. They show intense interest. They mirror your beliefs and values. When you say, oh, I really believe this. Oh, me too. If they can, they'll also mirror your nonverbal behavior. They may echo your language, everything to make you feel a real strong affinity for them and feel like you're on the same page. They'll share stories with you that make them appear vulnerable, so you'll feel sorry for them. And here is a really big indicator. They will move the emotional intimacy forward very, very quickly. They'll, first or second date, you go out with somebody, they're talking about, oh, we have beautiful children, or, oh, I could see myself spending my life with you. You're the kind of person I always wanted. Now, most guys who are listening to this are recoiling right about now, but for a lot of women, we've grown up with too many fairy tales where the princess meets the prince maybe once and ends up married to them. So we have those swept away romances everywhere in our lives. So a lot of women are very vulnerable to these sorts of tactics. And I'm not saying men aren't as well, but nowhere near as much. Now, many people, when that happens, somebody's mirroring and talking about how great you are and your affinity and all of this, people think, oh, we have great chemistry. No, what the person has enacted is called strategic bonding. They're creating a connection that feels unusually deep and meaningful very quickly for you. What you don't understand, they could be doing this with lots of people. You won't know that. You're only doing it with them. But it is a strategy. It is a psychological manipulation strategy, and it works really well. Empathetic people tend to believe these claims of deep emotion are real. They're not. It's just effective manipulation. So what it happens is by thinking the best, walking around thinking the best, thinking people are safe, thinking most people are good, thinking if this person claims that I'm just so special that they must really mean it, you are walking into a terrible trap. That's one of the reasons I gave the episode the name I did, the empathy trap. Now, here's another thing that happens when you get involved with these toxic manipulators. Small boundary violations. You'll notice when you first get involved with them that if you're talking on the phone, if you're texting back and forth, if you're on a video with this person, they just never want you to hang up. They'll do everything they can to keep you engaged. It's called marathoning, and it's effective in making you feel, it gives you something that they call artificial intimacy. If you have protracted contact with somebody, especially late at night or when you're tired, you'll feel like you know that person well and for a long time, and it just won't be true. So the boundary violations are also really important, trying to get you not to hang up, trying to get you not to go away. If they pressure you for emotional or personal disclosures that you feel maybe it's too early to really reveal this, or this is not something I talk about with anybody. They'll make jokes at your expense. They'll tease you and make you feel self-conscious and then be really kind about it afterwards. Oh, I was just kidding. I would never have hurt your feelings. But what they want to do is make you more insecure, because then they gain control. And as I said, when you come take my training, I show you step by step how it's done. And by the way, I start the training. I have programs, modules that are appropriate for 13-year-olds, and they get it. So this is not, it took a lot of science to put it together, but I made it so it's accessible to everybody because it's so important. Now, one of the most powerful hooks the toxic manipulators use, especially for empathetic people, is manufactured vulnerability. They'll talk about how horrible their past partners were. They'll talk about how unfairly they're treated by other people. They go on and on about discrimination. They'll make themselves into these huge victims. And they say they have these emotional wounds that only you seem to understand. Crocodile tears everywhere. Whether it's true or not, because I have to say the vast majority of toxic manipulators that I've met did have harsh upbringings. But whether what they say is true or not, what they're not talking about is how they hurt other people, how some of the tragedy that they're talking about, especially as an adult, was a result. It was them being held accountable for their bad behavior. The purpose of telling you these sob stories, though, is to start evoking a sense of protectiveness, a desire to help and to heal, motivation to rescue. Once you start feeling that way about that person, that bond psychologically is very, very hard to break. It's amazing that once you start feeling responsible for that person, it is a very resilient bond. And usually that they can cry or have a disaster. And even if you said you weren't going to rescue them this time, you'll find yourself helping them out. Again, I'm saying this especially since a lot of people are just joining us. Most of the tactics that I'm talking about are used within the first 30 days of your acquaintance. The first 30 days. And this is why I really want to roll out my program. Because again, I mentioned at the top, this isn't just about romance. This is about friendships. This is about work relationships. This is about you getting involved in a political movement or a social cause. The first 30 days are crucial, and I can show you exactly what they do if they're trying to manipulate you into joining and becoming extremely involved, and in a way that makes it really hard for you to exit. Knowing what they are, how to protect yourself, what to do, you being very specific on what the tactics are. As I mentioned, when I've gotten feedback, and I've been offering my Unmasking the Abuser program since late 2006. So that's 20 years. And more than 82% of people said they were immediately able to use it. And within 6 months, they came across all sorts of situations, not just in romance, but also in work, in their family relationships, where they were now able to clearly identify what that tactic was, and they knew how to protect themselves against it, which is something else I teach. Now, I'm sorry, but when I put this up, it disappeared. So if you go to Amazon and you look up a book called But He Says He Loves Me, I have it in both a physical book, paperback book, or you can get it in audio. You can get an audible version and just listen to it. It's not long, but it walks you exactly through the tactics used by toxic manipulators to trick somebody into a relationship. And in case you have even less time, $10 will get you a copy of the ebook, The Brief Overview of Abusers' Strategies and Tactics. And it's like a magazine. Every page has graphics and whatever. It's less than 60 pages, so it takes less than an hour to read. I wanted to get this information out as widely as possible, and I didn't want people to have to spend a lot of time or pay a lot of money. Okay. Now, again, pay attention to the patterns at the very beginning of your relationship, even relationships that are now you identified as being very troublesome. I want you to think back. How did they react when you set a boundary? How did they react if you ever disagreed about anything? How did they react if you weren't available, if you said you needed space, or if you said no in any way? Those moments reveal crucial information about the person's character and intentions. Now, also, often when I've done media about my programs, about my work, people ask me, well, I know you have all these programs and you've done this work for a long time. You have a TED Talk. Unmasking the Abuser is also a TED Talk. I would advise you to go watch. Okay. I did a TED Talk on it. They said, if you could just say one thing that would keep people safe, what would it be? It's this: look out for too much too soon. Whether it's some sort of leisure group, some sort of mindset group, political affiliation, social cause, workplace, personal relationship, friendship, look out for somebody it's just intense and at you from the very beginning. And if it's a interpersonal relationship, too many compliments, too many promises, too many gifts or promises of gifts, too much talk about the future, all when you're first getting to know each other. It's just so intense. Unfortunately, the way our brain works, it will choose intensity over moderation almost every time, unless you put the brakes on. So if anybody does this to you, if anybody has done it to you, it's a clear warning sign. Also be wary of anybody that declares emotion too soon. Now, if in a workplace, it would be like, oh my God, how did we ever go without your skills? You are such an invaluable part of the team. You've been there a week. Okay. So you can adjust it a little, but it's still just too much. It's designed to use your ideals, your kindness, your trust, your desire to be loved and needed, to trap you, to control you, to keep you from leaving once the mask comes off and you see what kind of trouble you're in. Keep in mind, not everyone approaches relationships with the same intentions. Empathy can be one of our greatest strengths, the ability to understand somebody else's perspective. But empathy paired with awareness is what you want. You want to connect deeply with genuine people while recognizing those who might try to exploit your kindness and know that they are there. It's one of the problems. I don't know if any of you in the audience have ever worked with offenders of domestic violence. One of the biggest problems those of us who work with both sides have, and especially people who work with the victim survivors, is that by working only with offenders, the people who work there tend to take their side on things. They only hear their side of the story. So they tend to side with them and think, oh, they're so hard done by. And then they come across the person or the people that they've hurt, and it's a whole different kettle of fish. And it's why understanding the empathy trap is so important. Now, as I said, this Walter Masterson guy, he thinks he's such a good person because he's calling for open immigration. He couldn't care less if that invites a lot of people who have as part of their political philosophy to dominate us, who have as part of their political philosophy to kill us if we do not convert and share their beliefs, who have as part of their normal culture to sexually prey on any women that are not part of their group. So putting all the women in the community at risk of doing business where they don't feel accountable to anybody that is not part of their group. And that's not just the ones that threw the bomb. We have a lot of people like that. We've invited a lot of people into the West that have no respect for our laws and our cultural norms, and the differences that they bring and the issues that they bring last generations. Many of them are permanent. There's nothing wrong with standing back and saying, if we want to have a successful, high-trust society that thrives, what do we need to do? And what do we need to get rid of? And as I said, it's so interesting that he's so kind about a terrorist throwing a bomb trying to kill people, but instead reserves his ire for the person protesting against him. Once you recognize the tactics that I'm talking about, toxic manipulators lose the advantage. You start looking before you leap. These are the tactics they rely on most. You can be a lovely person, a kind person, a generous person, and not fall for it. You have to get rid of your willingness to assume everyone has good intentions. Please be more cautious than that. Be more wary. Because the toxic manipulators rely on those predictable psychological mechanisms. Here are a few of them that make them most successful. Love bombing plus the fairy tale lure. Excessive admiration early on, plus building an ideal future, walking you into a future where everything's rosy because you're part of the group or you're part of the relationship. You feel chosen, you feel special, you feel understood. And then the dynamic shifts once they gain control. Intermittent reinforcement. Kindness one day, cruelty the next. This unpredictability, rather than weakening the relationship, it actually creates an even stronger and more resilient bond than if they were just moderately nice. Again, your brain is not always your friend. Guilt manipulation. You're the only person who understands me. If you leave, I'll fall apart. In abusive relationships, I can't count the number of women who've gone back to a terrible, toxic relationship because their ex-partner threatened to hurt himself if they didn't do it. And of course, empathetic people feel responsible, so they go back. Reputation attacks. When you begin to resist, they'll frame you as a villain. Suddenly you're defending yourself instead of confronting them, which is what you really need to do. Toxic manipulators actively search for empathetic people because they're easier to control. They'll explain away bad behavior. They'll say, oh, maybe they had a hard life. They assume shared values. We've talked about that. You cannot assume other people share your values. They try to fix things, including people. So they'll create endless crises and ask you to come and help them. Empathetic people hesitate to set hard boundaries that they expect people to actually adhere to. And again, it's not romantic partners only. Friendships, workplace relationships, social causes, or political affiliations use these same tactics. The toxic manipulator creates a psychological maze with confusing behavior, emotional pressure, selective kindness, threats and intimidation. And then soon the victim starts doubting their own perceptions. How do you protect yourself? Number one, stop assuming shared values. Some people simply do not care about fairness or honesty. Consider behavior patterns, not explanations. Pay attention to what's happening, not how they explain it away. Patterns of action reveal the truth. Boundaries are not cruelty. Healthy people respect limits. Toxic manipulators fight them. That reaction tells you everything you need to know. And your empathy has to include you, and it has to include your children and your family and your friends. It's not all about the person who's just making the demands all the time. Empathy combined with clear boundaries becomes something really powerful. It allows you to care deeply about others without surrendering your judgment. Understanding manipulation is one of the most powerful ways to protect ourselves and each other. So please get the information you need to understand what manipulation looks like. Questions or comments, contact me on X. That's now that the show is coming to a close. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. If you want to book my Unmasking the Abuser program, my Healing the Rift program, which is an anti-bias program, please screenshot this, contact me. If you want to see all the different work I do, go to my website, www.ethicalstrategic.com. Thank you so much. And thank you, Frank. Frank said excellent episode. So thank you all. And I will see you again next Tuesday. And by the way, the easiest way to contact me is go to X at Dr. Dina 1. All right. And if you have a suggestion for a show topic, that's a good way to find out too. Okay. And I will see you all next Tuesday. Bye.